Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy, and this program is part of our series on changes following a likely Russian victory in Ukraine. And with me tonight is Madelyn Hoffman, our peace activist and correspondent, coming to us from Colombia. She's a longtime veteran studying international relations and trying to create an environment for peace in the international system. She's been a Green Party candidate for vice president under Ralph Nader way back in, wasn't it 1996?
1996, exactly.
1996. And then later on, she's run for governor of New Jersey and she's run for senator from New Jersey. Always on the Green Party ticket. So
That's
she
correct.
is a Green Party activist, and she was also the president of. She was the president of an organization devoted to creating peace around the world. For how many years, Madelyn?
Almost 20, 18.
Almost 20 years.
Yeah, I'm old.
18 to be more specific. And now she has been seeking new worlds to conquer. So she has moved to Colombia.
Conquer is not a good word, Joe, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. Well, new worlds to conquer is just an expression.
I know, but I couldn't resist.
And I'm also joined by Dee Peers, who is the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends.
It's good to be here.
Hey there.
Thank you, Dee. I'm very happy to see you, especially since you didn't have your own show tonight.
Yeah, I had a busy day today, so I didn't have a chance to get a show ready and do a show. So,
Okay.
one of those days.
This is just a question to ask you in that particular. Did you see the Roger Waters defense of the smears against him?
Oh, I didn't. I don't. What are you talking in particular? Because I know I've heard people making comments against Roger Waters, and it's been pretty.
He has a rather long video out. It's not a tremendously long, but it's substantial. A substantial video defending himself, basically attacking cancel culture and censorship. Expressing his own background and what he's gone through over a period of years. It's extremely effective, and it's focused on his fight for Palestinian rights. So it's very relevant to what we've been doing, in around the world with Dee and Friends, and it's probably something that should be considered.
Yes, I would,
because it's very, very powerful.
Yes, it's important. It's important to have that on the show because you look at when you look at how long things have been going on, you look at, say, his age, you look at so many people, but then now you look at the new generation, that young girl graduating. So it's been so many years, and Roger Waters is somebody to look up to and to give strength to people that are fighting for the freedom of the Palestinians and acknowledgement.
Yeah, we really ought to talk about his defense of himself.
Yes.
Because the attacks on him have been really ridiculous.
They have been.
Yeah, and even Miko Peled, who is was in the Israeli army, whose father was in the general in the Israeli army, who's become extremely pro-Palestinian. He defended Roger Waters, and he talked about if I'm not mistaken. He talked about the people that the Germans were arresting in the streets,
Yes.
and continued. For many years, I think the anti-Semitism in Germany had either disappeared or had been obscured by other things. But now it seems like that's come back.
Yes.
And,
Them in Germany also, from what I understand, Muslims are experiencing.
yes, yes.
And I've uploaded some of his TikToks onto my channel.
Who's
Nico Pearl,
Mikos or Roger?
Nico's, and some stuff with Roger, Waters put up there. And because I look around on TikTok to see, what I could upload onto, what's relevant for me to upload onto my channel, different things, because it's the concept of being around the world
Mhm.
and putting some shorts up or even videos. And that's what I think about Dr. Joseph Firestone with you having stuff, with going on to TikTok, some of your stuff. But even if there's people, I know that, what's his name? There's different MMT people that are on there. And you could probably take their stuff and put it onto your channel as well as, your own stuff. And sometimes it just adds to it.
Yes, I agree. I certainly agree.
We need
Okay,
a
let's
tutorial, Dee. We need to
What's
know
that?
how to do we need a tutorial on how to make TikTok videos. I know I do.
yes, I
Oh,
do
okay.
too. And I probably need a tutorial on how to do these very short videos, okay, on YouTube,
Mhm.
film clips, okay, as well. But I have a feeling there are no shortcuts for the film clips. You just have to go through each of the longer videos and you have to find the parts that you want to clip.
Yes, and
Now, there's
whatchamacallit, StreamYard says that they have a new tool for that.
Really?
I haven't looked at it yet, but they say they have a new tool for it.
That's
the
So I'll have to
StreamYard
interesting.
take a
tool,
look
you
at
mean?
it. StreamYard said they do.
Oh yeah, I know. I've looked at the StreamYard tools now. Okay, I think I understand them, but I don't think they're really a quicker way of doing things.
It's lengthy. It's lengthy. It takes time.
Yes, it takes time because you still have to determine where and when you want to clip the streams.
That's
And
what I haven't gotten the short stuff done from. I just have the main shows. You know what I'm saying? Then the video, say, of when you talk about a topic, Madelyn talks about a topic. I have those things from the start to the end of those. But to take that into a 1 minute thing or a 2 minute thing,
Mm.
that I haven't done because, like Joe said, it's lengthy. It's time consuming.
yes, it's very time consuming.
Hmm.
I agree. So maybe what we should be doing is short videos in the first place because the
You
demand seems to
mean,
be for short videos.
you mean cut my comments to 30 seconds?
No, 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 no.
On your own, because I've seen people on you on blah, 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 I'm spitting my words out. I've seen people do that where they take an article, they'll show the picture of the article in the background. I'll just show them the
Mm.
article and I'll just upload something and that's about it. But what they'll do is they'll start
Mm.
talking about it in just a short frame, whether it be a minute or
Mm.
two, and then that's it.
For example, evidently Ben Norton was getting complaints about the length of his videos. And
Mm.
his were not too long. He was going about an hour or
Hmm.
something like that. And so now he's determined he's going to make videos that are shorter. And he just cut a 12-minute video that okay, is very good. And he was talking about the bricks and
Mm.
growth of the bricks, and the applications that have been made to the bricks, the possibility of a new currency.
Mm.
Okay, and then where he would normally have talked about taking this into another subject, specifically about the changes in the new development bank, which is the BRICS Bank. He explicitly said, "Well, I'm going to change. I'm going to save that for another video next time." So he kept his own video. This particular video to 12 minutes.
Hmm.
He disciplined himself, and he kept it to 12 minutes. And he talked about his second video.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. But let's go on to the topic for tonight. Uh, it's our usual topic for this series, the changes that are likely to come following a Russian victory. Uh, so, uh, I suppose in starting to talk about that in our conversation tonight, we have to note that there's been a disaster, okay, in Ukraine. Okay, a part of the dam in Zaporozhye has broken and has flooded a very wide
Hmm.
area, including a large part of uh, Kherson City, uh, and it's creating problems for lots and lots of people. You know, it's a natural disaster, and it's causing all kinds of problems for the people who live there. Hundreds of thousands of people, at least. Okay, so a big disaster.
Hmm.
Of course, the Ukrainians, okay, are blaming the Russians. Uh, okay, Russia has denied any involvement at all in it, and furthermore, there is no evidence of any Russian motive for doing it because the way the situation has been going there now is the Ukrainians began their counterattack that
Hmm.
was supposed to happen in the spring. Okay, and that was, well, it's been supposed to be happening for a long time now. Finally started happening perhaps 2 days ago. And all of the little attacks that have been launched and that were probably part of a bigger effort were easily repelled by the Russians. And the point is, we all know the war of attrition has been going very well for the Russians lately. They've established basically control of the air. They're hammering Ukraine all over with their control of the air. And of course, the casualties being sustained by Ukraine are heavier and heavier as time goes on. Where people are estimating that there are 350,000 fatalities, 350,000 military fatalities, okay, in Ukraine. So generally, the war is going very, very well for Russians. And of course, there was talk of them accomplishing a counterattack, okay, as soon as the Ukrainian attack was blunted, okay, was turned aside, which it looked like was already starting to happen. And then this disaster happened.
Hmm.
Uh, People who have been on the spot uh, have been saying that there's no evidence that either side actually caused, okay, the disaster. That there was a problem with the dam, which was created by some of the previous events, okay, of conflict, and some weaknesses, okay, that were created, okay, in the dam, and that they probably caused the disaster. So it was nothing immediate which the Russians did, okay, and nothing immediate which the Ukrainians themselves did. But of course, the disaster not only is a natural disaster for the people involved, but it also creates a change in the military situation because the floodplain that is covered by the dam recently had started to get hard ground again,
Hmm.
and now it is a thoroughly drenched area. And there were reports before the disaster when people were speculating on the nature of the Ukrainian attack, that they were going to go through Zaporozhye and through the Kherson City area. Now it would be impossible for them to do it because the men and machines would simply sink into the mud. Okay, where there is mud, and in many places are simply still flooded, and the mud is under the water. So it sort of creates a situation where the Ukrainians evidently uh, will not be able to continue to launch attacks in the area they were seeking to attack so they could somehow get to Crimea. So this disaster, okay, is in their way. On the other hand, it creates problems for the Russians because they can't build a counterattack. Going across the river very easily now. It sort of suggests to me that maybe if they want to launch an offensive of some sort, it's now likely to be in the Kharkov area. Or perhaps they'll be coming down from the north and trying to attack, okay, in that way. Okay, in other words, the Russians have troops in Belarusia, okay, and the Belarusian troops are also there. And there's always been a possibility that they would launch an offensive from there and not from the Donbass region, okay, at all. And so that may be something more likely to happen now because of the natural disaster that's occurred. I'm speculating now, of course, putting
Is,
the two together.
is there any possibility, I've been running this through my head for the last couple of minutes, and coming up with an answer of no, but I'm going to throw it out there. Is there any possibility, you think, um, that it would signal a shift in sympathy towards the Ukrainians, and make it harder for Russia to do anything that would, the terrain aside, just in terms of the way people are thinking about the situation when
Yeah,
it,
I don't think I see that because, first of all, the area that's being flooded, the Kherson area, is now claimed by the Russians as part,
Mhm.
okay, of Russia. They had a plebiscite there, okay, and it was overwhelmingly in favor of union, okay, with Russia.
Right.
So there's some dispute about whether the area is still a Ukrainian area, or whether it's actually part of Russia. Okay, which may, if anybody's to blame, okay, and the Ukrainians are to blame, then their motivation might have been, to attack, okay, a part of Russia and stop any possible Russian attack, okay, since they were losing so badly and their resources to continue the war are far less, okay, than the Russians. It does create, okay, just a little bit of a motive for them to attack, okay, the dam, okay, and to cause this. But from what I'm hearing, there's no evidence they did that, and there's no evidence the Russians did it either. But what you just said, Madelyn, also triggered a thought, okay, in my head, since it puts a crimp in the offensives that are planned, okay, on both sides right now, and it increases the suffering of the people, okay, in that
Yes.
area. Maybe that's the perfect excuse for an off ramp and for
Mhm.
negotiations to start between the two sides to end this,
There you go.
which would be the most wonderful outcome of it, if it was to occur. I'm probably being too optimistic in even suggesting that this would cause the U.S. to back off. But of course, there are always possibilities that there will be a coup by the military, okay, in Ukraine,
Mhm.
and Zelensky will no longer be part of the equation, and that then the Ukraine military might seek a peace. So
Mhm.
some part of the Ukraine still exists. Okay, and seems to me that would be a very logical thing for them to do. Of course, the Russians will impose terms that make it clear, okay, that Ukraine can never be a threat to them again. But still, Putin might well allow, okay, a Ukraine to still be, okay, an independent state. He might want to settle it, okay, in that way, so he himself doesn't have the responsibility, okay, that comes with the absorption, okay, of all the Ukraine. It is said that he wants no part of the Western Ukraine, uh, because there are so many people there who are just anti-Russian, so um, um, anti-Russian. I'm not speaking of the Kiev area now, okay, but going west from the Kiev area into that part of Ukraine that used to be a part, okay, of the Austro-Hungarian Empire before the First World War. That area is extremely anti-Russian, okay, and that's also where the Nazis in the Ukraine were most situated. So it may be that Putin really doesn't want any part of, that area. Uh,
Is that where Baba Yar is?
I'm sorry.
Baba Yar, the forest where
Yeah,
some.
yeah, Baba Yar was in that area, and the Banderites were
Mhm.
strongest in that area.
Mhm.
Of Ukraine, in the area around, okay, Lviv is the way the Ukrainians pronounce it. Okay, Lvov is the way the Russians pronounce it.
Mhm.
Uh, that's an area where there was a lot of anti-Russian feeling, also a lot of anti-Semitism was centered, okay, in that area, and the neo-Nazis have been centered, okay, in that area. So this is all speculation, of course, uh, okay, but I guess it has to be or should be a part of the conversation.
Well, especially since the people who are most anti-Russian say that what Putin wants is to take all of Ukraine. And then after Ukraine, he wants to take this place and that place.
Yeah,
I mean, the way that you're describing it is a lot more, there's a lot of, it's the way that I see it as well. He's not trying to extend his empire. The United States likes to do that. He's trying to reclaim places that were or that are Russian. And it's a very different,
uh,
or Russian sympathetic.
when he first started out, in
Mhm.
fact, all through the period 2014 to 2022, the time of the invasion,
Mhm.
he didn't seem to want to annex the Donbass, okay, at all. He seemed to be resisting that. He was even resisting the recognition of Luhansk, okay, and Donetsk. When they actually went out, okay, and declared two republics. He resisted the recognition of those republics for years. Okay, so it didn't seem like he wanted to annex the area. What he wanted was for Ukraine to stop oppressing the Russians, the cultural Russians, okay, that were in those areas.
Mhm.
Not only in those areas, but in Mariupol, okay, in Odessa, okay, as well. And there's no doubt that the citizens of those areas were being viciously treated by the Ukrainian
Yes.
army during this time. Okay, Putin certainly wanted to stop that, but there was no evidence before December of 2021 that he was even thinking of trying to go in and fight there.
Mhm.
Uh, and the reason why he changed his mind seemed to be that when he tried to get through to Western authorities, and particularly to Biden,
Mhm.
and to talk to them and to get them to respect the red line that he had drawn, and to also uh, try to go back to a Ukrainian political situation that was neutral with respect to the Russians, he was rebuffed or ignored by Joe Biden.
Mhm.
And so finally, he decided the West had no interest in listening to what he had to say. And that's when he decided to mobilize and start the special military operation, as they called it there, okay, the SMO. But not until that time. In other words, he began to mobilize for it, okay, in December of 2021, and continued on the mobilization in January and February of 2022, and did not attack until February 24 of 2022. And there's plenty of evidence that he attacked in response to a Ukrainian mobilization that planned to attack and conquer the Donetsk and Luhansk areas, and then start a purge of
Yeah.
all the cultural Russians, okay, in those areas.
I
So,
do remember how quick he was to say that he would, I don't know exactly I don't remember exactly what words he used, but for the Donbass, or was it Donetsk and Luhansk, when they said they wanted to be independent, he very quickly acted to say, okay, you know, well, independent slash leaning, Russian leaning. He immediately welcomed them. But that was after a long, that was after many, many years, many attempts, many, as you
right,
said, the rebuffs that came before the invasion.
right, that came before the invasion. Uh, okay, he rebuffed them, okay, a number of times during the period 2014 to 2022 when they were getting attacked. Uh, when the Ukrainian army, okay, was attacking them after 2014, okay, the Ukrainians had mobilized uh, their army and integrated the neo Nazis into their army,
Yes.
and the right sector into their army, and uh, gave the okay for them to constantly shell, the Donetsk area, okay, and also the Luhansk area, okay, as well.
Mhm.
But no, there was no evidence that he was looking to take
Mhm.
over Ukraine,
Mhm.
okay, until the early part of 2022, and as a defensive move against the mobilization of the Ukrainians themselves. And we know that he did attack uh, with an inadequate number of troops as well, not enough troops to conquer Ukraine.
No.
Uh, in other words, there were 200,000 troops. He was outnumbered by the Ukrainian troops, who numbered at that time nearly 700,000 troops. So clearly, there was no way he could have expected to conquer the whole of Ukraine with 200,000 troops.
Mhm.
And then by March of 2022, he was trying to negotiate, okay, with them, using Turkey as the broker. Erdogan, okay, as the broker, and reports were that they had come to a peace agreement. And then the story is that that peace agreement was torpedoed by Boris Johnson, who flew in there and expressed the views of Washington and London that uh, they should be fighting further uh, uh, to weaken Russia and offering the full support of the West, the continued full support of the West for as long as it takes. And that seems to what kept the war going. If the West had stayed out of it, it's likely Zelensky would have made a peace at that time, okay, with Putin. And there may not have been, okay, an annexation. Uh, Certainly, the Kherson area would not have been annexed. Uh, the Zaporozhye area would not have been annexed. The Mariupol area around there would not have been annexed. It would probably just been limited to Luhansk, okay, and Donetsk. So that would have been much better for Ukraine in terms of the future, and such a peace agreement was definitely possible. Okay, but they rejected that. Anyway, that took us on a little bit of an excursion.
It did, through Ukraine.
But we now have a situation where it's still looking increasingly likely, okay, as though the Russians are going to be the winners of this, though we can't really predict how the disaster is going to affect the military flows. Okay, so I hesitate to say how quickly a victory is likely to occur, but okay, it seems like the Ukrainian forces will be further weakened by this. Their counterattack, the counteroffensive they were planning, seems to be knocked into a cocked hat, okay, by this. And so now the next move is Russia's, and they have far more resources and far more troops in there now. And, the Ukrainian troops have been decimated by the years of war they've experienced and all the fatalities. And there are no more young men to impress into service in Ukraine, because so many people have left the country or are in the areas the Russians have conquered. So I can't say exactly what the military plans are going to be, okay, at this point. I think that will only become clear within 2 or 3 weeks as we see what the Russians do in response to the disaster.
And as we move into the summer, which is, I've seen predictions saying that this will end in the summer. This war will end because of the situation on the ground.
Yes, I've seen that too. Some people say that it will certainly end by the end of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there are predictions that it will end in just a few weeks from now.
No.
But maybe in August or September or something like that. And I don't know whether those predictions will hold now or will be delayed by the disaster, because I don't know what the Russians were planning in terms of their own offensive and whether they intended to go through the Zaporozhye area themselves or not. They may not have intended to attack in that area. It may be they're angling now for Kharkov and for Kiev. We just have to wait and see.
Kiev would be tough.
Kiev would be tough, but Kharkov would not be so tough because there are a lot of Russians in that area too.
Mm.
And it used to be Russian territory, okay, as well. And it's also fairly vulnerable to the military reserve forces, okay, in that area. Kiev would be tough because of the street fighting and how long it would take, to go into those apartment buildings and clean out
Yes.
the fighters that, might be there. Okay. On the other hand, it may not be hard to basically cut the head off of the Ukrainian government.
Mm.
That might be done with a very forceful, okay, and limited attack, and that might totally change the situation. I don't know exactly what the Russians are planning, and I'm not a military expert. Uh, okay, so I guess I won't say any more concerning that. But
But you think that there's a weakness in Zelensky?
well, what I think is that uh, were the Russians to run a very forceful commando operation, they have command of the skies, total command of the skies now, and they could be pounding Kiev, okay, keeping people, okay, indoors and launching a relatively small but powerful operation on the headquarters, okay, of the Ukraine government, and they might be able to topple Zelensky that way as part of a more general offensive. But it's up to the military planners to figure something like that out. I'm not competent to do that. So, going further, though, while all this is going on, of course, the BRICS nations are going forward. And I think the mood from their point of view is that the Western powers, okay, the collective West, because of the losses they're taking, okay, in Ukraine, and because of the deindustrialization of Europe that's going on, due to the destruction of the pipeline,
Mm.
that they're beginning to feel that the collective West is weaker, okay, and weaker. And they're beginning to see that the United States, when it comes to ground forces, okay, are also weak and may not be in a position to stop them by launching ground wars, okay, in other parts of the globe.
Mm.
Okay, so many weapons have been drained from the West, by the effort, okay, in Ukraine, sending weapons to Ukraine. Uh, the West is very stretched, and the capabilities to produce the weapons of war, the artilleries, the planes, okay, the tanks, the capacity to produce those quickly, okay, is not there.
Mm.
Even the super weapons of the West, like the Patriot missiles, the HIMARS, um, those kinds of things, we don't have anything like a World War II capacity to produce those anymore. We don't have the capacity to produce those that we had in the early 1990s because we've been busy trading and we've been busy with small war efforts, where it's very easy to overwhelm the opposition from the skies And even with all the money that we spend on defense, as we all know, our defense industry is very bloated. It isn't very efficient, and
No.
they don't really have a productive capacity to produce a lot of these super weapons in a short time. We're also very focused, okay, in the Far East in terms of our naval power and missiles and aircraft carriers and things like that. Those cost, okay, an awful lot of money. And I don't think we've been putting the money into the production of the tanks and artillery and things that would be very important if we wanted to launch some ground wars all over the globe. I mean, I don't think the capacity is there for us to do that.
And let
And
alone
I'm not
the,
complaining when I say that.
no, I
I'm even
understand.
glad that that's the case.
Let alone the soldiers to fight in the wars. I haven't seen figures recently, but ever since the Iraq War in 2003, um, my sense has been that the military doesn't have enough. Um, it's hard. They've been having a hard time recruiting more soldiers, which is again, I'm not sorry or sad about that. But it's not only an equip.
Okay, I think we do have to introduce some perspective here, which is during the Second World War, we had a population of nearly 150 million people. Might even have been 140 million people by the end of the Second World War.
Okay.
In the armed forces at that time, in that World War, we had 15 million people.
Wow.
15
10%.
million people under arms. 10% of the population. Yes.
Yes.
We now have something like 335 million people here in the United States. And if I'm not mistaken, I haven't looked very recently, but uh, as of the turn of the century, we had about 1 million people in the military. And I don't think we've increased the size of the military since then. We've increased the cost of our weapons and the sophistication of our weapons technology. Uh, and of course, we have strengthened our submarine force since then, okay, and gotten more sophisticated in our nuclear capability. And we've built these super tanks. But I think we have only about 1 million people under arms right now. So that's just to introduce some perspective. We are in no position to fight
Right.
wars,
Right.
all over the globe. We are in no position to land armed forces into Venezuela because we don't like the government there. We are in no position to do the same to Colombia. We are in no position to do the same to Brazil. And as the South American nations get more and more closely together, Brazil has a population of 215 to 220 million and considerable military capability for defense. If they ally with a few of the other South American nations, as I think they will if there was some kind of U.S. attack on them,
Mm.
uh, we don't have enough troops to conquer those areas, okay, and to defeat them. Only 1 million troops. We're not ready. We're not ready to maintain our global hegemony.
Mm.
That is the truth of the matter.
Maintains slash, and then let alone expand, right?
Yeah, let alone expand. I think the neocons are barking up the wrong tree. They are fighting the trends of history and also our own development as a nation over the last 30, 40 years. I mean, they're fighting against that, and they simply will not recognize it.
Hmm.
Okay, but I think other nations do recognize it. I think they recognize that we are not the force to be feared we once were. They do recognize that the military threat we pose, or the nuclear threat we pose, is countered by the Russians and the Chinese quite well right now. So we're really not in a position to use, okay, our nuclear weapons.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness, yes. So I think the other nations realizing that, and realizing that some of the major weapons of continuing to dominate the world, which the U.S. has been using, were economic. They are now moving very strongly to dismantle the financial structure we were using to, order other nations around, and they're using the BRICS to do that, and the new development bank, okay, to do that. Uh, the BRICS, as I think you know, are Brazil and Russia and India, China, and South Africa. 5 nations. 13 additional nations have applied for membership in BRICS. They're likely to be accepted this very month. There are evidently a number, 6 other nations who have been seriously contemplating formally applying. If they apply, they will be very quickly wrapped into the BRICS.
Now, some of those, there's some more Latin American countries that are considering this. Is that not correct?
It's,
Considering to join BRICS, I mean.
I think that's correct. I think Argentina, okay, is one of them.
Mhm.
Okay, I would be surprised if Colombia isn't one of them.
Agreed.
I think certainly Venezuela
Mhm.
is going to be one of them. Okay, so I think there will be South American countries that will be joining. Now, where Mexico stands, okay, I do not know, but I think AMLO is going to want to
Mhm.
strengthen his international economic position because some of the U.S. senators are saber rattling about sending troops into Mexico, which is totally ridiculous. Oh, and by the way, in case people don't realize it, the population of Mexico right now is, I haven't checked recently, it's somewhere between 120 million and 130 million.
Mhm.
It's a well populated, strong nation that at this point is very patriotic.
Mhm.
Certainly under AMLO, it's very patriotic. And the more the United States rattles sabers against Mexico, uh, the more resistant the Mexicans are likely to be.
And I would think that there would be Latin American countries that would come to their defense.
Yes, would come to their defense. And by the way, uh, 1 million people under arms.
Hmm.
Not, I mean, and we have our troops scattered all over the world. But let's say they're all back home and all
Hmm.
suddenly devoted to attacking Mexico.
Hmm.
You cannot conquer 120 million people with only 1 million people under arms. I mean, it just isn't possible. And it's not going to happen.
Gonna
So
lay down my sword and shield, seems to me.
yeah, I mean, we have to stop looking to military solutions for everything because we don't have the armed forces. But anyway, what I started to say was that all these nations recognize that we're not the power that we used to be from a military point of view. And from an economic point of view, our power can be dismantled by them if they come together and create an alternative economic structure. And they are doing that with BRICS. And of course, you've heard about the plans to create a new BRICS currency for international trade.
Yeah,
Uh,
they've already got the banks set up and everything else.
they have the new development bank, okay, which is set,
Yes.
which, by the way, I understand. I forget the figures exactly, but I'm sure at this point that the new development bank is capitalized to a greater extent than both the World Bank and the IMF.
Mhm.
I know that sounds astonishing, but the BRICS nations have managed to get together more capital to support their new development bank than we've gotten together to support the World Bank, okay, and the IMF.
Well, wouldn't part of that be that both those formations, the IMF and the World Bank, bankrupted, put so many nations into debt and bankrupted them that there isn't anything left. It's been so top down and moving people from, the agricultural areas into the cities and the austerity measures and all of that. What's left for some of these countries or many of these countries?
Well, evidently, there's enough left for them to join the BRICS
Mm-hmm.
and to help to capitalize the BRICS. And also, the BRICS, of course, are creating, they'll be creating their own money using the new currency that they are well on the way to formulating. And reports are that they're going to set up a system that approximates the ideas, okay, of Keynes that he tried to get the world to adopt in 1945, okay, at the end of the war. Okay, those ideas were for each country to keep their own currency for domestic purposes, but then to create an international currency. I forget what it was called, but just for trading, just for trading. Okay, this plan was called the Bank Corps Plan. Okay, and the BRICS nations have been looking very seriously at doing something very like the Bancor plan, which was rejected by the United States at the end of 1945 because the international currency, of course, was going to be a neutral currency. It was going to be based on a market basket of all of the major currencies of the world. And that's what the BRICS nations are looking at, okay, right now. But all the individual nations will keep their own currencies for domestic purposes, which is very important because it gives them policy space to handle recessions, okay, and business cycles, okay, of various kinds, because they will be able to do deficit spending. Okay, that is unlike, okay, the Europeans, who under their agreements are limited to only 3% of deficit spending, okay, each year. While we here in the United States, if we have a crisis, we can go to 10% of deficit spending or 12% of deficit spending, or whatever we really want, as the Japanese can do and the UK can do, okay, and other nations that have a sovereign currency. Okay, well, the BRICS won't disturb the sovereign currency of each of the individual nations for domestic purposes. It isn't clear to me yet how the international currency is going to operate, but it's obviously going to operate, okay, in cooperation with the new development bank. Perhaps in the end, the new development bank will be able to issue the currency. I don't know how they're going to set that up, but they're moving very fast with this. The
It sure
intent
seems like it.
the intention is to produce the new currency before the end of 2023. That fast now to have it in place. And meanwhile, of course, the BRICS nations are trading with one another and with nations likely to join BRICS very quickly,
In
uh,
defiance of U.S. sanctions.
using local currencies. They're trading in local currencies. They're accepting local currencies, not transacting in the dollar, and they're already reducing the number of international transactions that are using the dollar by a considerable percentage.
Hmm.
In other words, it used to be at 80%. It's now much less than that. I've heard various figures about where it is now. I've heard figures that it's as low as 40%. I don't believe that.
Hmm.
But I think it may be as low as 60% already, because major transactions are going on in oil, which are using the yuan, or which are using the ruble,
Mhm.
or which are using the rupee. Major international transactions in energy are going on in currencies other than the dollar.
Well, wasn't that the reason for the war, the first Gulf War back in the 90s? One of the reasons, that Saddam Hussein was threatening to buy and sell the oil
Yes.
in the euro at that time. It was not, but that was a big threat to the U.S. and the U.S. economy. How dare you move, the financial underpinning for this industry? How dare you move that from the dollar?
And that was a big reason for the overthrow of the Gaddafi regime, okay, in Libya, okay, because he was trying to organize, okay, with other African nations for them to use their own currencies to trade in. And
Mhm.
Hillary Clinton saw that, okay, as a major threat, and that was one of the reasons why she wanted to overthrow him.
And that was the reason for the overthrow of Mossadegh in Iran in the early 1950s. You
Yes, it
know,
goes back a long way.
every attempt and Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. How dare people, in countries around the world decide that they're going to let the profits or the revenues, not even profits, the revenues from their own resources go back into funding things in their country. How dare they?
When the 13 new nations, okay, are admitted to BRICS, if it
Mm-hmm.
happens this month, it's going to be a big shot in the arm. It's going to be a shot, heard around the whole world, and will likely propel these other six nations that have been seriously considering it to go right in as well. So suddenly the BRICS won't be at 5 nations, but they're going to be at 24 nations. Okay, now it's already the case that if you compute GDP in purchasing power parity, that already the BRICS nations, just the 5 nations, have a GDP exceeding that of the G7 countries.
Really?
They surpassed the G7 countries, okay, a number of months ago. So, of course, in nominal GDP, the G7 still are greater, but when you take account of the currency differences and you do it, okay, in the purchasing power parity, it shows the true economic uh, uh, strength of these coalitions, but compared to one another. And it already shows that the BRICS nations are surpassing the collective West.
And why don't we hear more about that from the collective West?
Because our newspapers aren't covering it,
Mm.
generally speaking. You get some coverage of it, okay, at Bloomberg, but generally the mass media just ignores that. Now, first of all, a lot of the mass media just don't like to talk about economics at all.
True.
They don't like to talk about trade, okay, at all. They like to follow the colorful politics, okay, in Washington, which in the long run don't mean very much, okay, and they don't look at these broader global trends that are, so much, uh, actually so much more important. Uh, and then they focus on things like the Davos meeting, as if the billionaires who are running Davos are continuing to run the world. But they don't. They may run the collective West, but the collective West as a group is getting weaker and weaker. And the BRICS nations are getting stronger and stronger. And their economic meetings, economic conferences, are more important now than Davos. There's a big economic conference that's coming up this month in St. Petersburg. I think it's on June 16th to 17th. And it's going to be a gathering, okay, of many, many nations. And Western news reporters are being barred from that conference. So they won't even be able to report on it. So since they won't be able to report on it, they probably won't even try to find out what's going on there. And we're going to have to get summaries from alternative sources as to what is happening there. And I think a lot more significance is going to happen there than was happening at Davos this year. So it's all very interesting, but everything is happening very fast. The world, okay, is realigned. It doesn't seem like our State Department is paying any attention to this.
They're oblivious. They're oblivious to what's going on.
They seem to be oblivious. I agree. They seem to be oblivious.
And we were talking, weren't we, Dee, the other night about Biden putting his foot into his mouth. I don't remember in what context exactly, but totally, Saudi Arabia and Israel and normalization of relations. It's like,
Yes.
wait a minute, what plane are you on? What universe are you in?
Yeah, it's crazy.
One of the nations that at this point is reported to be seriously considering joining BRICS this very month is Saudi.
Yes, I saw that.
And they said they cut oil production, just the other day, which is gonna throw some of the old alliances into a tizzy.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and they probably cut it, I shouldn't say this because I don't know, I'm speculating, but maybe they cut it in order to change the direction of where it's gonna go. Maybe to kind of break the umbilical cord with certain nations so that they can redirect it. What do you think?
Well,
What
I
I think,
also know that Saudi Arabia is trying to economically change where they don't want to be so dependent just on oil. They want to be able
Mm,
to do other things besides just oil.
uh, okay, I think they've been doing that actually for some time. There have been major efforts to develop solar power for
mm,
Saudi Arabia because they know the oil is going to run out. Okay,
Hmm.
at some point, and they know they're going to have to develop, in other directions. Okay, but to directly address the question, okay, Madelyn asked, uh, what I think is that it's a double whammy.
mm,
They're cutting the oil production, but they're also redirecting the oil sales away from Europe and
mhm,
to the east as much, okay, as they possibly can. Okay, and we've already got a situation where the Iranian oil, of course,
mm,
okay, is going to the east. And if it's the case that Venezuela joins BRICS also
oof,
very soon,
oof,
actually, Venezuela has more oil than any other nation. It's just extremely heavy oil, and there's a problem refining it. And the main refinery that was doing that was in the United States and was owned by the Koch industries, which is kind of a bit of an irony.
big irony, yes.
Okay, and I have a feeling, though, that other nations will be intervening and helping the Venezuelans to refine their oil. And when
Mm,
that happens, of course, that's a bigger oil resource than any other nation has, including Saudi.
mm,
Okay, so we may be looking at that too. But if we're saying Venezuela is going to join BRICS, and Saudi is going to join BRICS, and
oof,
Iran, is going to join BRICS. Uh, the only other major source of oil, okay, in the world, when all that is said and done, okay, is the United States. We've been producing huge quantities of oil through fracking, and we don't really want to do that.
no, and part
Fossil
of,
doesn't really want to do that. Of course, the oil
no.
companies want to do that, but
Well, the people of Colombia don't want fracking either, which is one of the reasons I'm here, is to help build alliances with the anti-fracking groups in the United States.
yes,
But Joe Biden is being lauded for the debt ceiling uh, bill, and that's got how many pipelines and how many perks for the oil industry?
a lot. But also, of course, the Mountain Valley Pipeline deal that was made for
Right.
expansion
Yes,
is
exactly.
really key, and that's a terrible deal from the climate point of view. Uh, Very good for the fossil fuel companies. Didn't have to be done. It was
Mhm.
ridiculous, okay, that it was done because Biden could have simply ridden over the Republicans with the 14th Amendment, with the platinum coin, with consoles. There were three different ways, okay, of doing it. And he just wanted a compromise, okay, with the Republicans because that's what he loves.
But yes, but then also, as he's been for oil and the oil industries, hasn't he, over his career in the Senate and elsewhere?
Not as much as the Republicans. It's usually been the case that the Republicans, okay, have been the ones who've had the, uh, the who've had the tightest contacts with the oil industry. Okay,
Mm,
and the Democrats are more closely associated with other kinds of oligarchs as opposed to the oil oligarchs. Okay, but in this case, certainly Biden and Manchin have been doing, a lot for them,
mm,
and they're certainly reciprocating with large campaign contributions. I think we're seeing that, going on. Okay, but to get back to the main action of what is going on, the BRICS nations, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, this is moving very, very fast to create a situation in which the United States, from a geopolitical point of view, never wanted to see.
mm,
And that is the situation where a block of allied nations that were opposed to the United States gets control of the world island, to speak, in geopolitical terms. That's happening now, as it's happening in front of our eyes, and it's happening fast. Okay, and
well, mm,
to have a defeat of the West, okay, in Ukraine is drawing off the West's power,
mm, mm,
as BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Belt and Road Initiative are all moving forward, okay, at once, and Western strength is getting drained by a losing effort, okay, in the Ukraine war. I mean, that war, from the standpoint of world power politics, is a disaster for the collective West. And I think will take us many years to recover. I don't even know if I should say us, the collective West, because Europe has been so weakened by this.
mm,
There's supposedly big unrest in Germany now. The other day, Schultz gave a speech, and he was absolutely yelled off the stage. He had to leave. He couldn't give his speech. The opposition was so strong to him.
mm.
The indications are that it may be the government in Germany will fall before the government in France. But both governments have severe internal troubles right now. And the British are not in any good shape either. The Tories are not in any good shape either.
Because that's a question that keeps coming up, but it's a little late and I didn't want to open that can of worms, but you've opened it anyway, you've opened it.
Well, I
And
always
that,
want to accommodate you, man.
and that question is, because we never, I don't, well, we rarely talk about it in terms of, okay, rents are high, homelessness is on the rise, student loan debt, people are going to be asked, students are going to be asked to pay back their loans. Infrastructure is crumbling. The healthcare system is a mess. The environmental crises continue. The United States is, I mean, what's going to happen to the ordinary person in the United States when the U.S. dominance, hegemony, however you want to put it, when that's done and that's gone, and other countries have taken the lead, what's going to happen to ordinary people in the U.S.?
Well, what's going to happen is going to depend upon whether the people that are running our governments here in the West come to terms with the fact that they cannot play the austerity game. anymore. On the plus side, Canada has a sovereign currency. The United States has a sovereign currency. Japan has a sovereign currency. Australia has a sovereign currency. There's nothing preventing these nations from running large scale deficits to make their economies really prosperous. If they keep trading among themselves, most of what they need to be prosperous can come from countries in the Western Bloc. I'm not including the Europeans now. They have resource problems. Okay, it seems to me they had better get on with the transition to wind power and solar power and alternative sources of power as soon as they can. They should develop a 5-year plan to be totally off of fossil fuels in 5 years. However difficult that may be, I don't think they're looking at it in that way. And I don't know if they can combine to do that in any useful way, because Europe is still fragmented into nations. The economic integration has not proceeded far enough. The political integration has not proceeded far enough, so they can act in a unified way. But they don't have internally the natural resources to maintain the prosperity they've built over a period of years. They were dependent on Russian fossil fuels and Middle Eastern fossil fuels, both of which may in large part be cut off from them. So Europe may not be able to maintain a coherent and prosperous bloc for too many more years without a radical shift uh, to a different kind of energy foundation than they have now. They had been proceeding along lines of that, but not quickly enough. Really, not quickly enough, because they were still relying on the fossil fuels. Okay. Uh, but for we here in the United States and other allies like Japan, Australia, in other words, nations that we were really friendly with, uh, we can probably maintain strong trade relations with them, get what we need in terms of foreign trade, mostly from them, and all of our countries, which are monetarily sovereign, can probably solve their internal problems, but through investments using currency that is generated by the monetary sovereigns. So I think these countries, uh, I don't think what I'm describing now, is the best way to go. But I'm saying I think that if we went that way, we could still maintain our prosperity. Now, I think we'd actually be much better off by developing collaborative foreign and trade policies with many other nations, particularly the rest of the nations in our hemisphere. Uh, we have to say it's our hemisphere, but it's their hemisphere too.
Indeed.
And we have to treat everybody very fairly. We have to make trade deals that are good for all and that protect the various populations against the corporations, exploitation by the corporations. That is so important. Any trade deals that are made with other nations cannot have investor state dispute settlement clauses or things like that. Those have to become a thing of the past. We have to subject our corporations that go into other countries to the laws of those countries. We have to tell them, you want to take the risk of investing in another country, you have to be prepared to obey their laws as they're democratically decided upon by the people of their countries. And if you don't wish to do that, don't invest in other countries. But the government of the United States is not going to back you by trying to override the democratic decisions of other countries in terms of their law. Those days,
That that would be something mm, amazing if it were to happen.
yeah,
It
we
would
have to see
throw.
that. Well, I think Roosevelt kind of started on that with his good neighbor policy.
Mm,
And I think even after the war, we were more friendly to those kinds of ideas. But then over the years, the
mm.
corporations gained the upper hand again, just as they gained it here with their donations. They used those same donations to support was basically imperialism in other countries all over the globe, but especially in all of Latin America.
You've got that right.
And this has just screwed up things to no end.
And
Now,
it continues now. It
it continues.
continues into mega mining, fracking, avocado production.
Yes,
Uh,
avocado production, which is very resource. It's very expensive from the standpoint of the natural resources of those countries that do it.
yes, water is number one. Number two, it's a monoculture, so the land that has been so rich and fertile gets converted to just the same crop all the time. The trees, forests have to be natural forests, indigenous forests
Yes.
need to be need to be eliminated, and then Roundup comes in as a way of controlling quote unquote the pests. So you've got the pollution from that. You've got Oh man, somebody had held up an avocado for me a few years ago. And they say, you look at that avocado, the production of it, it's more than 90% water. So much water is needed to produce it. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think there is a move here in Latin America, though. I know there is to push back on that. And
Yeah, I think there are movements all over Latin America to push back on that, right?
yes, yes. And
And so I think we have to go to Latin America in a different way.
mhm,
I mean, we have to approach nations of Latin America, okay, as equals
yes.
and make deals that are not just good for us, but good for them too. And we have to be very careful to do that and cultivate long term relationships of that kind. We really have to recognize the nations of this hemisphere, okay, are our neighbors.
Not our playground, not our personal playground,
Yes,
not our personal,
neighbors.
a bank account that we can open up and use to enhance the finances of this country, of the United States. I can't say this country because I'm in Colombia, but no. And then the indigenous, the campesino, the Afro-Colombiano. This is something that in Colombia is being spoken about every day. These populations that have been involved in the production of fruit and vegetables, who have worked in the port cities, and have moved products in and out of the country. These populations have been ignored for too many years, and so I agree with you, Joe. Something needs to shift there, and the people who I mean, with all the biodiversity here in Colombia, for example, is second only to Brazil per hectare. With all of the biodiversity and the richness of the land, why is there so much poverty and hunger? And the poverty, in just 4 years has increased. I guess in part because of the pandemic. Um, but there should be, nobody should go hungry. Nobody should have a lack of water, should suffer from a lack of water, because the country is filled with the opportunity to produce food and filled with water.
Yes. We have to develop an orientation towards Latin America,
Mhm.
not just in terms of trade that's fair for both sides, but we also have to care about the full development, okay, of Latin American nations as much as we care about the development of our own nation here. We really have to adopt that kind of orientation. That's the sort of good neighbor policy
Mm.
that we need to follow. And we got to do it right now. That
Mhm.
means we got to get rid of Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan
Count
and
me in.
Victoria Newland.
Mhm.
Got to get rid of all those types of people. And we got to bring in people who know Latin America and who care about Latin America and put them in charge of our foreign policy for this particular hemisphere. When we do development deals with them, we had better be competitive or better than the deals the Chinese, okay, are offering.
Mm. We got a lot of catching up to do.
We have a lot of catching up to do. Obviously, we need new people in power in Washington who are not creatures of the donors, because the donors are all opposed to this. They only care about extracting profits from other nations for their companies. In short, we have to stop the imperialism.
Mhm.
Okay, anyway, I'm sort of getting the feeling that that does it for tonight.
Yeah, it seems like a good stopping point, Joe.
Yes.
Seems like a good stopping point. Okay, so thank you both for coming. Let's look and see if there are any comments.
Yeah, Andy Candy has one.
Ah, Andy Candy. Greetings, good people. It's really comforting to know the U.S. doesn't have the military productive capacity to start a major war to disrupt the BRICS and those looking to join them. And Andy
Mm.
Candy says, I heard Cornel West is running for president. Uh, that is problematic. I mean, I don't think it's problematic for Cornell to run for president, but I understand uh, he's running under the standard of the MPP, the Movement for a
Mhm.
People's Party. And the People's Party, in terms of its organization, has a very checkered kind of history. There are corruption questions involved with respect to the leadership of that party.
Mhm.
They've had a very difficult time in getting on the ballot. They're only on the ballot in 3 states. Uh, I think over the years they've raised a considerable amount of money to start something, but I think the leadership of the People's Party has been siphoning off the money for unclear purposes. Uh, there were very good people who got involved with the People's Party, people like Zainab Day, and also Paula Jean Swearingen comes to mind. And they stayed there for a while. and then they left because of internal issues in the People's Party. So I don't think that Cornell made a good choice of which party to run in. Uh, he might have been better off trying to run as an independent, trying to organize his own party. But I probably shouldn't even say that because I don't know where he was coming from.
And we'll see. I think we'll find out more, and we'll see if other third parties, want to join the effort. I mean, because there certainly is room and space, a whole lot of it, for people like Cornel West,
Yes.
Christopher Hedges, true independent thinkers. It's still early. We'll see how it all unfolds, because I know the political world was shaken up by this. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yes, we will see what happens. But Chris Hedges, by the way, had Roger Waters on his show
Oh, yes?
very recently, either today, okay, or yesterday. I
I want to
haven't had
see
a chance
that.
to watch that yet, but I'm going to watch it with interest. Andy Caney says, "Oh, okay, Joe. Well, I guess RFK Jr. is the only kind of good candidate right now. If Cornell doesn't take the big money, is he viable though? Uh, okay. I think if someone who announces comes out and says that he's taking only small donations and he runs a small donation campaign the way that Bernie did, he can raise a lot of money through small donations, probably enough money to get his message out if he can gain a little momentum. Okay. The question is whether the alternative media is currently strong enough to get his message out right now. We do know more and more people are leaving traditional media and are turning to podcasts and alternative media for their news. That's a trend. It's a powerful trend. Whether it's powerful enough for Cornel West to get his message out, I don't know. And the same goes for Marianne Williamson. Uh, I have to point out that RFKJ, uh, uh, after supporting Roger Waters because of his stances on censorship, okay, and freedom of the press, then backed off of support, okay, of Roger Waters because of the Israeli motivated smears, okay, that were going on. The case was made by third parties to RFKJ that Roger Waters was an anti-Semite. Okay, and RFK buckled on that issue
Quickly.
quickly, and said basically, well, he was supporting Roger Waters because of his stances, okay, on censorship, okay, and on Julian Assange, okay, and he didn't know about, the anti-Semitic background. Well, what anti-Semitic background? There is no anti-Semitic background. That's a fiction. Okay, why did he buckle? I think he buckled for a very practical reason. He's running in the Democratic primary. He doesn't want to attract the Israeli connected lobby groups, the huge quantities of funds the billionaires are able to mobilize in this country through APAC, the DMFI, uh, both the PACs and the super PACs. We are talking many millions of dollars that would immediately be thrown into the race, okay, against him, with all kinds of ads, being taken out, charging that RFK Jr. Okay, is an anti-Semite. Okay, so RFK, he obviously backed off so quickly because he didn't want to fight that particular battle. He probably knows that Roger Waters, okay, is not an anti-Semite, but he probably feels he's in a position where he has to choose the hills that he wants to die on, and this particular hill, the hill of Palestinian rights, was not one that he wanted to die on. So,
I'm going to have to say good night.
okay, good night, Madelyn.
Good night.
Good night, Madelyn.
And thank you.
Continue on. You're welcome. Continue on.
Okay, many more good conversations coming. Okay, so I think that he decided that wasn't a hill that he wanted to die on. I think he'll be much more firm when it comes to climate issues and when it comes to environmental issues. And I see that in his interviews, uh, he's also defending himself extremely vigorously against the anti-vax attacks. So he's willing to fight in those areas. And he probably thinks that he's taking on a lot of big money in those areas. And he doesn't want to do the same thing with respect to Palestinian rights. So I'm sure that's, his particular calculation. Now, I have to say that calculation was made by John Fetterman, and he avoided having the big Israeli money coming against him as a result. And he won his race for the Senate. And now, serving in the Senate, there were there were 4 Democrats and 1 independent uh, who voted against the debt ceiling bill. And one of those 4 Democrats was John Fetterman. So he was out there as left as you can go, okay, in the party, with Elizabeth Warren, okay, and Ed Markey and Jeff Merkley. Those are the leftiest among the Democratic senators. And of course, he stood with Bernie Sanders also, who's the only independent senator. So, I don't care for the trade off that John Fetterman made, but I have to say, John Fetterman is an awfully big improvement as the senator from Pennsylvania over Dr. Oz. I think in good conscience we have to recognize that. I think probably RFK took the position he took, okay, on Palestinian rights. Oh, by the way, he did say that he cared about Palestinian rights. So he did not back off from the idea of caring for Palestinian rights. He just backed off Roger Waters' defense of the Palestinians on grounds that people had come to him and had made the argument uh, that Roger Waters was an anti-Semite. Andy Kenny says, unbelievable how much power Israel has over the U.S. Well, I guess what I have to say there is it's not so much the power of Israel, okay, over the U.S., it's the power of money over the U.S. and the billionaires here in the U.S. who support Israel so strongly that they basically take my country, right or wrong, attitudes when it comes to Israel. That is what, okay, is going on. It's those billionaires who have power, okay, over the U.S. To neutralize their power, what we have to do is dump the corruption. What I advocate for in the other two of my shows during the week, or two of the other shows, I should say, because I have a third other show also. But what Dump the Corruption is about is showing that basically the whole Congress, and we expect to find the whole Senate, has sold out to the donors. They no longer represent us. They're representing the donors. We no longer have a democracy until we stop that. We can stop that by voting against anybody who is taking big money. And of course, I define what big money is in that graphic I often show on here, which I guess I'm going to show again right now, might as well. Since I'm obviously operating under a head of steam here. Okay, so there's the rule. Vote against every candidate except those who won't take money from wealthy corporations, individuals, PACs, or party committees, and who repudiate all super PAC support. If everybody takes corruption seriously and votes this rule, we would clean out the House completely in the 2024 elections. I mean, completely. The only people who would win would be candidates who don't take the big money. Those candidates would likely be Green Party candidates and Libertarian candidates and independent candidates of various kinds. We would have them actually running the House. We could do that in one election if everybody stayed faithful to the movement. So, as far as the Senate, we could replace 1/3 of the Senate with third party candidates in 2024, and we could strike the fear of God into the other 2/3 of the Senate if that really happened. And we could shift politics that way. I think we could do it in one election in 2024. The Senate would be a little harder because we would have only taken over 1/3 of the Senate. But that 1/3 of the Senate can hold the balance of power, decide who gets the chairmanships, and push for floor votes on certain laws. The floor votes could come about as a result of that. And those floor votes would allow people to judge how their senators are behaving. And that could be great for the 2026 election coming up. I think people running in the 2026 election, after seeing the slaughter in the Senate in 2024, would stop taking the big money. if we could make this movement successful. Andy Candy says, yep, money in politics is why we're losing democracy. I always say we live in a corporate dictatorship. Yep. So I think it's not just a corporate dictatorship, it's a billionaire dictatorship. The corporations and the billionaires. So I guess my head of steam is gone. I'm about ready to say goodnight. So, Dee, would you like to offer something?
I guess we'll see you tomorrow night. I mean, you spoke a lot. There's a lot. You covered a lot. It's 10:48. It's kind of late.
Yeah, it's 10:48.
And,
Yeah, it's kind of late. I agree. Okay, thank you, Andy Candy. I don't know how many people were here tonight. I didn't check earlier, but thank you for
yeah.
coming, Andy Candy. I think we had very low attendance tonight.
Well, I think
It's too
the
bad.
election season, when you never know who's going live, and the people will run over there to see them. So
Yeah,
that's
but of course, if we're running good quality streams, that should not make a difference.
Oh, it shouldn't, but people do during election season do things like that.
I understand that, but on the other hand, they
I
almost
know
realize by now
what
that
you're talking about.
nothing happens, in the elections that the billionaires and the corporations don't want to happen,
Exactly.
and that they cannot change that by just voting for candidates
No, they can't.
who sound good.
And maybe they'll watch your show later.
Yeah.
No, it's nice if people would watch your show, because I don't know why they're getting so hooked on to this other stuff right now, but people are doing it.
You mean getting hooked to what kind of stuff?
Well, the different people going live, and then people are, talking about it, and all that stuff, going back and forth about it, about different
Anyway,
people.
Andy Candy says it was a great show. Loved every minute of it. Good night. Thank
It
you.
was a good show. You really covered a lot. And there is
Oh, you mean I was on steroids tonight?
yeah, and it was very good, because the thing that I was seeing a lot of, people, you have people realizing that a fall is coming with the US and everything. But how those people with the stocks, the money, and this and that, they're all worried, and that's all going on. And then you have other people saying, what's your second what's your plan B? What's your plan B? Like, people can just get up and leave and move to another country. Yeah. So there's panic out there. And then again, there's just people that are oblivious, that have no clue.
Andy says, your show is the most valuable besides Miss Rachel Kidd's show, quote unquote, that keeps the young uns quiet. Don't know why my show would keep the young uns quiet. But that's interesting. Thank you, Andy Candy. Okay, I guess we're going to say goodnight then. Dee, thank you again.
You're welcome.
And tomorrow, you're going to have an 8 p.m. show?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I will have an 8 p.m. show tomorrow.
Okay, I will certainly be there then.
Great.
Okay, so good night.
Yeah, good night, everybody. And hey, wait a minute. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share, and buy Joe a coffee.
Oh, yeah. Please buy me a coffee. And buy Dee a coffee, too, because she has great shows also at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, we try.
We have 2 great shows back to back.
Exactly. And we're not following what the mainstream media is telling you. We're bringing facts to you, what's really going on.
Yeah, and we're not even following what a lot of the independent shows are following.
Exactly.
We're doing something else.
Yes, we are.
And I don't want to denigrate any of the other independent shows, but I do think that in our 2 hours, we've been talking about quite a few of the most important issues going on, rather
Yes.
than the stuff that is, hitting the news every day. But even when we do something, that is hitting the news every day, like, for example, our coverage of the debt ceiling crisis, I think you heard certain things here that you couldn't hear anywhere else.
Exactly. You have things explained so people could really understand and really understand what the truth is.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Andy Candy, for your kind
Yeah.
comments, and thank you again, Dee, for being.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
Oh, Madelyn said she was having trouble staying awake. Yeah, I know that didn't have anything to do with me. I was good tonight. Or maybe I should ask you, was I good tonight?
Yes, I like 10:45 in after. You asked me to write down sections.
Ah, oh, you wrote down sections?
No, only one. I was trying to figure out what kind of thing to do.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, 10:45, actually around there. If you can go back and look at it, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I can go back and look at it. Oh. You forgot pills.
Ah, what time is it?
It's about 10:54.
What would happen if we took two now?
Then we wouldn't get to make love till about 12 o'clock. And I think maybe that's a little too late because I'm feeling like
You tired?
I need to go to bed relatively early tonight,
Okay.
like maybe 12:30 or 1 o'clock. So
Okay. That's all right.
it might be better to wait until tomorrow night, even though I know I'm going to miss you. I always do.
Me too. I love it. I don't know what happened to that.
Stick pin.
Yeah, that's terrible. I thought I'd better go through this because I might have pushed it in there without not knowing it.
You can't lose sleep over a stick pin.
No, I'm not.
You have to not do that.